Good morning, everyone. Can we make a test for the interpreters?
No.
So it's an honor and a pleasure to be gathered today with you to discuss the sensitive topic of enforced disappearance in the context of migration. So I was asked to moderate this panel on behalf of CCFD Terre Solidaire, which is a French-based NGO supporting local associations around the world working on enforced disappearance. And what struck us, me and my colleagues a few months ago, is that more and more NGOs are taking up the topic of enforced disappearance in the context of migration. Sometimes NGOs that were working on other topics related to human rights and said that they had to do so. They had to take up this topic because of the rising numbers of enforced disappearance on the migration routes, especially towards the north, and because of the indifference that this human drama is meeting currently. So the panel will be divided in two sessions. The first one will be focused on the causes of enforced disappearance in the context of migration and the needs. And the second panel will be more focusing on the answers that are brought or that could be brought to answer these needs. So with us today, to enlighten us on this topic, we have ENAMORADO. She's the coordinator of ReReFaMi, which is a network of women from Central America who are looking for their children who disappeared on the migration route towards Mexico. Anna is looking for her son, Oscar, since 2010. And she has been attacked in her efforts to find truth and justice. So she will share with us. Thank you very much for being here to share with us your experience. Then we have Helena MALENO GARZÓN. Helena is a human rights defender, journalist, and researcher. She's also a doctor at university, and she is the founder and CEO of Caminando Fronteras, Walking Borders, which is it's an NGO defending human rights in bordering areas. Thank you very much for being here. And at my right is Mrs. Barbara LOCHBIHLER. Barbara is serving her second term as an elected member of the CED, the UN Committee on Enforced Disappearance. And she has been initiating the comment number 1 of the Convention on enforced disappearance in the context of migration. So she will be telling us about this today to better understand what we mean when we talk about enforced disappearance in the context of migration. Thank you very much for being here. So without further ado, let's start. And Mrs. LOCHBIHLER, the enforced disappearance in the context of migration is not as obvious as the disappearance in the context of political repression, for instance. In this context, could you tell us how you initiated this general comment number 1 to the CED and help us understand better this phenomenon?
Okay, thank you. So in the Committee on Enforced Disappearance, we basically assist state parties to fulfill their obligations under the convention. And the other chunk of work is to kind of clarify the scope of the treaty. And this we do together with all actors and stakeholders. And as you also said, there is around in the world a lot of migrants who go missing. This figure is increasing, but missing is much broader than enforced disappearance. So there is and was a need actually to look particularly on the connection of migrants working on suffering and preventing them from enforced disappearance. And when we had dialogues with the state parties, some state parties, we as experts put questions. How is the situation for migrants in your country? And here we clearly saw that there is not much, how can I say, policy to it or thoughts being given on the situation of migrants. We use the term migrants in an inclusive way, so that we also think about the situation of refugees and, let's say, in looser terms, on all people on the move. Then when discussing this in the committee with state parties and amongst us as experts, we also realized the particular situation of vulnerability of migrants and of the relevance of migrants. Because frequently they are also migrants, and very often they explained that they are afraid, for example, to go through the authorities to report if a relative is missing or disappeared. And they have a lot of obstacles and face discriminations when they report a disappearance to the authorities. In the dialogue with state parties, we also realized, and also from following the media outside, that a lot of states increased militarization of their borders. So by doing this, forcing people on the move to look for all kinds of ways to save their lives or to migrate. So I think there is clearly, we see a big lack of a human rights-based border management in, I would say, all regions of the country, but I'm a European. I see it here a lot. And then, let's say, when we discussed it in the committee, we also saw that we have to have a focus not only to confront state parties with failures of or with enforced disappearances of migrants on their territory or their borders. We also discussed that we have to see what states can do to prevent that migrants become victims of enforced disappearance. So I would say that was actually the rationale of explaining why we adopt the general comment.
Thank you very much, Barbara. So now let's ask Ana ENAMORADO about her experience from the other point of view, the point of view of a person who has a lived experience of enforced disappearance. Ana ENAMORADO, could you tell us in which circumstances occurred the enforced disappearance of your son?
Sí, claro que sí. Buenos días a todos, todas las personas que nos escuchan, las personas que nos acompañan. Quiero agradecer de manera pues, muy especial por la invitación a quienes organizaron este evento, pero especialmente a Terre Solidaire por invitarme. Justo como ya lo mencionaban, yo soy mamá de Óscar Antonio López Enamorado, que tenemos aquí enfrente. Óscar es mi único hijo, es hondureño. Fue desaparecido el 19 de enero del año 2010 en el estado de Jalisco, México, justo pues en este contexto de la migración. Óscar, pues como miles de personas centroamericanas, de jóvenes centroamericanos que salen e intentan llegar a Estados Unidos, y en este camino del paso por México fue desaparecido. Son 15 años de estar luchando por saber qué pasó con mi hijo, por saber dónde está, qué le hicieron, dónde lo tienen. Hasta ahora no sé nada de él. Y llevo ya más de 12 años radicada en México para dar con el paradero de él, pero aunque he hecho tanto, hasta ahora Óscar sigue sin estar conmigo, sin estar con su familia, sin estar con la sociedad que también le hace falta. Pues el contexto de la violencia e impunidad que afecta de manera muy general a toda la población mexicana, también afecta a las personas migrantes, porque muchas de las personas cruzan el país en condiciones muy vulnerables. La gran mayoría de ellos han sido desplazados de su país de origen por esta misma situación, por la violencia, por todas las precariedades que ellos viven en sus países de origen, sobre todo Centroamérica. Y cuando pasan por México, pues se enfrentan a esta situación tan compleja, ¿no? Lo que es pasar por México en un país donde hay más de 110,000 personas desaparecidas y pues obviamente de las personas migrantes se sabe muy poco o no mucho de cuántas personas hay desaparecidas en territorio mexicano, personas migrantes. Entonces, las personas pues se enfrentan a una situación muy fuerte porque debido a estas políticas migratorias que cada vez son más duras, pues ellos son obligados a contratar a personas, a los coyotes para que les crucen pagándoles unas cantidades muy altas de dinero y estos coyotes pues obviamente les pagan a la policía, al Instituto Nacional de Migración, entre otros, para que ellos puedan avanzar. Algunos de ellos que no tienen las condiciones, no tienen los recursos y pues ante la negativa de las autoridades que no les atienden cuando llegan a solicitar un documento migratorio para poder cruzar por México o no les atienden para protegerlas porque vienen huyendo de esta situación, pues los pone aún en un estado de vulnerabilidad más fuerte y son obligados a avanzar por territorio mexicano. Y es cuando llegan a caer en las manos de grupos criminales. Y así es como ocurre la desaparición. Se pierde el contacto con los familiares y nunca más volvemos a saber de ellos.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Enamorado. Thank you very much. We understand the complexity of the situation of a family member looking for a disappeared one who disappeared, who know where on the road, and who also face the indifference of the authorities and the lack of mechanism to help search for them. At Caminando Fronteras, which type of work did you develop in addressing this complex issue?
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buenos días a todes, todas y todos. Nuestra labor se desarrolla en procesos de movilidad humana en procesos de movilidad humana en la frontera occidental euroafricana, que son todas estas rutas migratorias. Por una parte tenemos las rutas mediterráneas y por otra parte las rutas atlánticas. En estas rutas migratorias han aumentado las desapariciones en los últimos años, pero no solo por la peligrosidad de las rutas en sí mismas, sino porque la militarización que ha señalado la compañera del control de fronteras ha introducido una forma perversa de control migratorio, de control del movimiento, que es la omisión del deber de socorro. Llevamos desde Caminando Fronteras más de 20 años trabajando en las fronteras con una metodología de investigación-acción participativa que se implementa en el trabajo en red y de manera horizontal con las comunidades migrantes y también con las familias y con los supervivientes. Tenemos dos teléfonos de alertas, dos helpline, desde el año 2007, una para alertar sobre situaciones de riesgo de riesgo para la vida y los derechos humanos en las fronteras, y desde el año 2014 otra para las familias de las personas desaparecidas. Estos son los vergonzosos datos del año 2024. 10.457 víctimas en las rutas de acceso al Estado español. 30 personas mueren al día en las fronteras del Estado español, en las fronteras de Europa. 412 son mujeres, 1.538 son niños, niñas y adolescentes. En las rutas mediterráneas, como veis, 517 proceden de Argelia, 110 en el Estrecho, 73 en Alborán, pero son las rutas atlánticas las más invisibilizadas, con 9.757 víctimas, que se ha convertido en la ruta migratoria más mortífera existente en el mundo entero en estos momentos. De las rutas atlánticas, la de Mauritania es la que veis que tiene mayores víctimas, pero lo más importante a señalar aquí es que hay 131 embarcaciones que desaparecieron con todas las personas a bordo. 131 embarcaciones, miles de familias sin tener ninguna respuesta de lo que ha pasado con sus familiares. Por ello, sistematizamos las informaciones que obtenemos en terreno, porque estas informaciones, estos datos, son una herramienta de acceso al derecho a la verdad de las familias, son una herramienta para mostrar las responsabilidades y son una herramienta para señalar a los victimarios. Contabilizar a estas desaparecidas a través de los monitoreos y basándonos en fuentes primarias nos aporta una información más cercana a la realidad. Sabemos que son más, pero estamos seguras de que no son menos. Y 10.547 son demasiadas.
Thank you very much. We are touching upon the complexity of the search, and I would like to ask you, Mrs. Enamorado, about the difficulties, the extra challenges you're facing when you're looking for your son.
Sí, una de las principales dificultades y desafíos es precisamente lo que implica buscar desde otro país, desde un país que no es el nuestro. En mi caso, cuando inicié la búsqueda de mi hijo desde el año 2010, no fui escuchada por mis autoridades, por las autoridades de mi país, a pesar de que acudí con ellas y nunca hicieron absolutamente nada para seguir las pistas que yo les aporté en ese momento. Y obviamente, pues ninguna familia estamos preparadas para buscar a un ser querido. Ninguna madre cuando decide tener un hijo piensa en que en algún momento se lo van a desaparecer. Entonces no nos preparamos, no sabemos de eso, no sabemos qué hacer. Cuando yo inicié la búsqueda de mi hijo no se sabía de las desapariciones o muy poco, quizás se hablaba, yo nunca había escuchado esa palabra de desaparición y me vi obligada a desplazarme de mi país de origen para instalarme en México y aprender a iniciar una vida de cero y aprender poco a poco de las familias mexicanas para así continuar una búsqueda y obligar a las autoridades a que me escucharan, a que abrieran una carpeta de investigación y que busquen a mi hijo así como deben de buscar a los demás. Pero eso no ha sido nada fácil porque pues he enfrentado a la violencia institucional que todas las familias nos enfrentamos día a día y así como al peligro también que existe en México, que sabemos que en México han asesinado a muchas madres buscadoras y yo como madre, como una mujer centroamericana instalada en este país, que pongo en evidencia a las autoridades omisas e indolentes que no quieren buscar a las personas desaparecidas, pues me enfrento a una situación más de riesgo. Entonces, principalmente lo más difícil es cruzar estas fronteras para poder llegar a buscar a un país que no es el nuestro. Si no se tiene un visado, no pueden llegar las madres centroamericanas a México. No tienen recursos, tampoco el conocimiento para buscar y para obligar al Estado a que encuentren a nuestros familiares desaparecidos.
Thank you very much. You talked about the difficulty of looking for your child in a context of transnational migration, and you talked about also the institutional violence. So we understand why organizations and NGOs are coming to support families looking for their children, like Caminando, Fronteras. They are also facing challenges in their support to the victims of enforced disappearance. Could you tell us more, Mr. MALENO?
Bueno, lo primero es que estamos hablando de desapariciones invisibilizadas, desapariciones planificadas y desapariciones donde están implicados en muchas ocasiones estados del norte global. Estados del norte global que tienen una imagen de defensores de la democracia, de garantes de derechos humanos, y entonces resulta mucho más difícil señalar a los victimarios. Además, estos sistemas de control son un gran negocio para empresas de venta de armamento y de control de la seguridad. Y, por tanto, cuando denuncias ese negocio, eres perseguida. Además, estos estados del norte global usan la externalización de fronteras, el caso de México, el caso de Marruecos, de Mauritania, de Libia, de Túnez, usan esta externalización de fronteras como una herramienta para escapar a sus responsabilidades y subcontratan a países terceros para esas violaciones de derechos humanos y para colaborar en esas desapariciones transnacionales. Es además la omisión del deber de socorro en el caso de nuestra frontera una herramienta para provocar muerte, para dejar morir, y eso nos impide, esa omisión del deber de socorro invisibiliza aún más las muertes y nos impide señalar a los victimarios. Desde hace 10 años, las familias de jóvenes que desaparecieron por la intervención de las fuerzas de seguridad españolas piden justicia. El Estado español no solo les ha negado esa justicia, sino que ha impedido que se identificasen los cuerpos que están enterrados en España, en una ciudad española. Este vídeo que vemos a continuación nos va a mostrar un pequeño extracto del trabajo con esas familias.
Voilà, nous sommes une association qui s'appelle Collectif Caminando Fronteras. Nous sommes spécialisés dans la migration, d'accord, dans les droits des migrants. Ça, notre travail est, on est beaucoup puissant en recherche. Nous, on fait des recherches pour appuyer les droits des migrants.
Y la zona de impacto siempre correspondió a aguas españolas, lejos de donde se encontraban los inmigrantes.
Nadie llevaba, desgraciadamente, ni flotadores ni manguitos.
Los artilugios que estaban utilizando como flotadores se desprendían del cuerpo.
Tampoco ha habido contacto físico por parte de la Guardia Civil con los inmigrantes. No ha habido absolutamente nada de lo que este inmigrante cuenta.
Aquí, este es el momento en el que las madres saben la verdad y ven cómo la Guardia Civil Española dispara contra las personas migrantes. A partir de ahí inician un proceso de búsqueda de justicia que 10 años después aún no han conseguido. Por ello, uno de los principales problemas es la criminalización y estigmatización de las desaparecidas en contextos de migración, de movilidad humana y de sus familiares, como ha dicho la compañera. Esto provoca una gran impunidad y una falta de acceso con garantías a procesos de verdad, reparación y justicia. Las desapariciones, sobre todo en el mar, que no dejan rastro, son muy difíciles de reconstruir para las familias. Las familias, además, no tienen acceso a instrumentos de denuncia, no pueden venir a depositar los ADN, como decía la compañera. El problema de los visados está en todos los lugares del mundo, pero es que además no se facilita que se tomen las muestras de ADN en las embajadas, en los consulados, en los países de origen. Y lo más doloroso es que ante esta falta de información veraz, las redes de extorsión y estafa aparecen y venden a los familiares informaciones falsas. A pesar de todo esto, las familias están luchando por desmontar estas políticas de muerte en la frontera, saber la verdad, poder encontrar a las desaparecidas y, en el caso de encontrarlas muertas, poder enterrarlas con dignidad.
Thank you very much. We understand that the development of migration policies that are violating human rights are implied within the enforced disappearance in the context of migration. Mrs. LOCHBIHLER, how the general comment number 1 could be mobilized by several or various stakeholders in order to better enter the needs of persons victims of enforced disappearance in this context?
Well, when we established this general comment or worked on it, it is a huge process within the committee. So actually, it was very useful that we had the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and all their regional offices to broadly consult and to consult the human rights NGOs and experts, but also those who are working on migration. So they may not have a very strong human rights-based focus. And that was really very helpful, because also what 2 of you now said, we established this contact, global compact, general comment in a time when actually at the US-Mexican border, but also the land and the Mediterranean border in the European Union became more and more militarized, and the governments at the same time involved in increasing the militarization and covering up pushbacks and so on, at the same time saying, we, like in Europe, we protect the human rights of migrants. That's very difficult. So we had broad consultations with state parties, asking, what do you do if you fight illegal migration? What do you do to allow legal migration? And so I think we used these 2 rounds of public consultations with state parties, with institutions, with experts in Latin America and the Caribbean, in the MENA rights, which includes also Morocco, Tunisia, with Asia and the Pacific. And so I think we brought a lot of information together and networked. And what we do now is we follow up those networks to learn from each other. Then we clearly also saw from Geneva, that, for example, in the Asia Pacific, there is not so much experience like in the Americas, and how they can learn from each other. And we also, now inside our committee, we ask regularly and frequently in the dialogue with state parties, how is the situation in their country working on migrants. And actually, to my surprise, I have to say, we also have been thanked by governments that we came up with this precise general comment and the recommendations which helped them actually to improve their work. Preventing enforced disappearance. And I think what we, in summing up this, there is a clear need. If we look into the cluster of those who are working on migration, let's say also the International Red Cross and these institutions working on huge projects globally on missing migrants, to have a very specific focus on a human rights-based discussion, to look into disappearances and also into enforced disappearance, and encourage their staff and their teams to be trained to do this.
Thank you very much. So we understand that states were even sometimes thankful to be assisted in mainstreaming human rights in this context. and you formulated recommendations. Could you tell us a bit more about maybe specific recommendations you will give to states and other stakeholders?
So, you know, the underlying issue, and I think also Ana ENAMORADO, you said this clearly, the migrations politics get harder and harder, you say. Now, you see, we have to have an evidence-based migration policies in the countries, which includes to also fight illegal migration. But what we see is that there is a shrinking view only on fighting illegal migration, which criminalizes each person who is on the move. So it goes completely in the wrong direction. So the strong recommendation from the general comment is to adopt evidence-based migrations policies and foster access to legal and regular migration. Then, very precisely, we recommend to avoid and prohibit secret and incommunicado detention of migrants. And there should be no such incommunicado detention for migrants. And they should also not say if it is only for a short term, it's okay. There should no be, how can I say, the deprivation of liberty should not take place of migrants. Then you have to establish registers in the camps which you have at your borders or within the country. And we need to improve the search for migrants, and therefore we have to know where they are. And this is crucial. We explicitly looked in the tactic or in the method of pushbacks. When we started some years ago on this general comment, it was not clear that pushbacks is a kind of a method which facilitates actually also that migrants become victims of enforced disappearance. So we clearly say that pushbacks are incompatible with state obligations under the convention and can amount to enforced disappearance if they involve the deprivation of liberty of persons and the concealment of their fate or whereabouts. We also recommend that mechanisms must be put in place to support relatives and witnesses. And now, very often they face language barriers and they are being afraid of being detained or deported. But you know, we have a lot of very detailed recommendations. We also ask states to give a visa to relatives to come, for example, to Europe and to look and to try to help in the search and to identify. And then we need to foster international cooperation between the states, regional and also international cooperation, and that states have good communications between the country of origin, the transit, and the country of destination. And this opens a lot of questions who are not answered completely on data protection also, because some people are on the move because they are feeling they are threatened in their home country. So it's very difficult to exchange and to develop a good data policy. Yeah, I think these are the big clusters of our recommendations.
Thank you very much. Those are very precious recommendations. We understand that mainly safe routes for migration and the absence of criminalization of migrants is key. I will ask you the same question, Mrs. MALENO GARZÓN. What are the recommendations you will make?
Quería primero decir respecto a las devoluciones en caliente, recordar que en el año 2022 se produjo una situación terrible en la valla de Melilla y desde el año 2022 más de 100 personas, la mayoría de ellos procedentes de Sudán, están desaparecidos y la última vez que se les vio estaban bajo custodia de las fuerzas de seguridad del Estado español y de las fuerzas de seguridad marroquíes. Por lo tanto, para nosotras son una de las desapariciones forzosas más recientes en el Estado español. Respecto a las recomendaciones, reconocer a las desaparecidas en contextos de movilidad con los mismos derechos que otras desaparecidas y, por ende, reconocer también los derechos de las familias. Favorecer el acceso a las denuncias, a la toma de muestras de ADN, a que se tengan bases de datos ante-mortem que puedan cruzarse con los datos post-mortem de los cadáveres que están apareciendo. Cuando las desapariciones sean transnacionales, hay que desarrollar herramientas necesarias para efectuar gestiones a través de entidades consulares, embajadas, los nombrados visados, pero también tenemos que formar a los funcionarios con propuestas antirracistas. El racismo es una de las dificultades más terribles a las que se enfrentan también las familias que buscan a sus desaparecidas en contextos de movilidad humana. Trabajar en reparaciones colectivas, entendiendo que el impacto de estas macrodesapariciones, como hemos visto con las 10.000 víctimas, provoca también una macrovictimización en pueblos y comunidades de origen. Favorecer espacios de escucha, encuentro y reparación para estas familias dentro de las administraciones públicas y las entidades internacionales. Más presencia de las familias, que sean recibidas por los gobiernos de los estados del norte global, que también están siendo responsables. Y sobre todo terminar con la impunidad de los victimarios, porque a pesar de las miles de víctimas que os hemos mostrado aquí esta mañana en las fronteras europeas, no hemos logrado condenas que proporcionen verdad y justicia. Tal vez sea porque los victimarios son, desgraciadamente, demasiado poderosos. Hoy las víctimas de las desapariciones forzadas en procesos de movilidad humana también están presentes. El otro. No, no funciona. Os queríamos poner, lo siento, os queríamos poner un vídeo de nuestra página web donde encontraréis las fotos, los nombres de muchísimas personas desaparecidas. Podéis ir a ella directamente porque, como decía antes, queremos que esta mañana ellas, estas víctimas, estén aquí presentes. Gracias.
Thank you. Maybe at the end during the coffee break we can project it. You shared with us very important recommendations also to ease the work of the families. I would also like to hear from ENAMORADO, what recommendation would you make to the different actors so that your search is finally successful?
Sí, yo creo que lo mismo que las compañeras, creo que todas las familias tenemos las mismas necesidades y las exigencias para los estados, para las autoridades, es la misma. Requerimos que se busquen a las personas que están desaparecidas, que se castiguen a los responsables de estas desapariciones, un alto a la impunidad. Ayer se hablaba mucho de la impunidad, se habló mucho también del empoderamiento a las familias. Yo creo que las familias que hemos iniciado esta lucha por saber la verdad, por saber qué sucedió con nuestros familiares, la lucha nació del dolor, nació desde el amor por nuestros familiares. Y yo creo que más bien tenemos que capacitar a los funcionarios públicos, a estos funcionarios que forman parte de las instituciones, estas instituciones que tienen que atender a las familias, que desde el país de origen, cuando un familiar se acerca a una cancillería, a un consulado, tiene que ser atendida de manera inmediata y coordinarse con las autoridades del país donde ocurrió la desaparición y dar seguimiento para localizar a la persona que está desaparecida y evitar tanto desgaste en la familia. Para ello necesitamos que como organismos humanitarios internacionales puedan intervenir con los recursos que se requieren para que la capacitación en México pero en nuestros países de origen, que hayan personas y mecanismos realmente involucrados y capacitados de la Red Regional de Familias Migrantes. Hemos tratado de impulsar capacitaciones a las cancillerías y consulados en nuestro país de origen. Sin embargo, no hemos tenido ninguna respuesta cuando ellos a mí en su momento me buscaron y dijeron que la presidenta de Honduras tenía interés en el tema. Realmente eso ha sido falso, ¿no? Requerimos el apoyo del Comité de la ONU para que vigile que estas autoridades hagan un trabajo efectivo y que también que las familias se les preste todas las facilidades para que ellas puedan llegar al país donde fue desaparecida la persona, que ellas puedan acceder a su derecho de buscar, que se les brinde todas las facilidades, las herramientas y la seguridad para que puedan llegar a territorio mexicano y buscar. También aquí en Europa hay muchas personas que fueron desaparecidos cruzando el Mediterráneo. Conozco a madres tunecinas, argelinas, que buscan a sus familiares y a ellas también necesitan llegar a Europa para buscar a sus familiares y se les tiene que brindar la facilidad. Entonces necesitamos que sean vigiladas las instituciones para que hagan un trabajo efectivo y los funcionarios públicos que no hacen, no están haciendo la labor que les corresponde, pues tienen que ser despedidos y buscar a personas que de verdad tengan la voluntad de resolver el problema.
Thank you very much. So you said it. The person who are victims of disappearance on the road should be treated as any person who has disappeared. They should be searched and looked for, and their family should have the same rights as the other. Thank you very much for your testimony. We will welcome now the second panel, but stay next to us because we will need you to answer the questions at the end. Thank you. So now we touched upon the needs and already solutions. We will build up on this first session with our new panelists. And I welcome His Excellency, Mr. Gustavo GALLÓN, who is the ambassador of Colombia in Geneva, chairman of the UN Group on Migration and Development, and permanent representative of Colombia to the United Nations in Geneva. Welcome. We have with us today also Eulàlia Figueras CIVIT, currently serving as an international migration law specialist for the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, and she worked in the past notably for IOM in Morocco and Colombia. Thank you for being with us today. Next to you is Mrs. Gordana Vukasin. She's the project manager for Click Active, an NGO based in Serbia that provides legal aid and psychological support to people on the move, migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, and they are focusing on vulnerable groups. They are working on addressing risks faced by people in the context of migration, and they are one of the NGOs that had to work on enforced disappearance because of the facts, the context. And with us, we also have Milica KOLAKOVIC-BOJOVIC, who is the Vice President of the UN Committee on Enforced Disappearances and rapporteur also on the General Comment #1, who will help us sum up this session and take away with us some key points. Thank you all. So, Your Excellency, Colombia is one of the champion country of the Global Compact on Migration. Can you share your experience as a country of origin, transit, and destination regarding the thematic of enforced disappearance in the context of migration?
Thank you, Charlotte. Merci beaucoup aussi bien au Comité catholique contre la faim et pour le développement, qui est une organisation très importante pour le soutien des droits de la personne, notamment dans les domaines social, économique et culturel, mais aussi avec les droits civils y politiques. Muy buenos días a todos los asistentes. Un saludo muy especial a las integrantes de los paneles y les extiendo mi más sincero agradecimiento por haber invitado a Colombia a compartir nuestra experiencia. Me gustaría empezar dándoles a ustedes un poco de contexto sobre el fenómeno al cual nos referimos con nuestra experiencia como país de origen, tránsito y destino. Lo primero que debería decir es que tradicionalmente Colombia ha sido un país de origen de migrantes, ha sido un país de expulsión. Por décadas los colombianos hemos sido testigos de un largo conflicto armado interno que ha llevado a que 1 millón de colombianos se hayan visto obligados a abandonar el país, según el informe de nuestra Comisión de la Verdad de 2022. Es el segundo grupo con mayor cantidad de víctimas por ese motivo en el conflicto armado colombiano, después de los desplazados internos, que son más de 8 millones. El tercer grupo de víctimas del conflicto armado lo integran quienes han perdido la vida por esa causa, 500.000 de personas. Hay por lo menos otro 1 millón de colombianos que han buscado un mejor futuro por fuera de nuestro territorio, por razones distintas del conflicto armado, para un total igual o superior a 2 millones de migrantes colombianos o incluso más. 1 millón exiliados por conflicto armado, el otro por razones económicas o sociales. Sin embargo, y este es un segundo aspecto del fenómeno, desde hace unos años, hace aproximadamente 7 u 8, Colombia se convirtió también en uno de los principales países de recepción de migrantes. Y hoy en día en nuestro país hemos acogido a cerca de 3 millones de hermanos venezolanos, 2.800.000 para ser un poco más precisos. A pesar de que no éramos un país receptor, el gobierno colombiano optó por la regularización y la integración socioeconómica de nuestros hermanos venezolanos y venezolanas a través de un estatuto temporal de protección. Y me parece importante que se tenga en cuenta que durante muchos años, incluso décadas, el hermano país de Venezuela fue uno de los principales países de destino de nuestros colombianos migrantes, especialmente por razones económicas. Hay muchos colombianos que viven en Venezuela desde hace años y ya se han echado raíces en el país. A este escenario le sumamos un factor adicional, un tercer elemento, y es que en los últimos años, los 2 últimos años, nos convertimos en país de tránsito, ya que al norte de Colombia compartimos con Panamá una selva muy importante que se llama el Darién, el tapón del Darién, el único cruce terrestre que hay entre Sudamérica y Centroamérica. Realmente ni siquiera se podría decir que es un paso terrestre porque es una selva inhóspita, bellísima, pero inhóspita, con muchos riesgos que desafortunadamente se ha convertido esta ruta en los últimos años en un sendero irregular por el que optan miles de migrantes para llegar al norte. Para darles una idea, hemos llegado a tener 1.000 personas cruzando diariamente este peligroso paso. Adicionalmente, el desconocimiento sobre el recorrido de la ruta irregular incrementa el riesgo de desaparición forzada, además de otras violaciones, lo que deriva en la búsqueda de personas desaparecidas en tránsito y la gestión de cadáveres en la ruta. Asimismo, en otra parte del territorio, en un informe reciente, nuestra Defensoría del Pueblo resalta que en la ruta migratoria irregular que existe entre la isla de San Andrés y Nicaragua, encontramos tráfico de migrantes, naufragios, abandono en los cayos en medio del océano y desapariciones de embarcaciones de migrantes y tripulantes. Efectivamente, Colombia tiene mucha experiencia con la búsqueda de personas desaparecidas a raíz de las víctimas de desaparición forzada del conflicto armado interno, aunque todavía los resultados son muy bajos. Sin embargo, en el contexto migratorio, la desaparición forzada de migrantes representa menos del 0,5% de las estadísticas. Aparentemente una porción reducida de personas, pero que equivale a 5.000 personas. Una situación dramáticamente grave. Es importante destacar que independientemente del estatus de la persona desaparecida, Colombia busca coordinar esfuerzos entre diversas instituciones nacionales, como la Fiscalía General de la Nación y Ciencias Forenses, la Dirección de Investigación Criminal de la Policía Nacional e Interpol, para ofrecer una respuesta coordinada e integral a las solicitudes relacionadas con desaparición. Contamos con herramientas efectivas para registrar, rastrear y atender de manera integral los casos, ofreciendo apoyo tanto a las víctimas como a sus familiares. Asimismo, Migración Colombia, la entidad a cargo de migraciones, desarrolló la aplicación móvil LIBERTAP para que las posibles víctimas de trata de personas denuncien los posibles casos relacionados con este delito en los contextos de desplazamiento. Esta es más o menos la situación de nuestro país en esta materia. Muchas gracias. Carlota.
Muchas gracias. We understand that Colombia is really taking seriously this phenomenon of enforced disappearance, and you gave us like very concrete tools that you developed for the search. Other countries are less advanced, and I would say, how IOM can help in addressing this issue of enforced disappearances in the context of migration. Thank you.
Merci, Charlotte. Thank you so much to all the organizers and the sponsors and my co-panelists. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. IOM has a strong commitment to protecting, promoting, respecting and fulfilling migrant rights in line with our constitution, the agreement with the UN, but also our new strategic plan. IOM places the well-being of migrants at the center of its operations. Now, we also encourage a comprehensive approach to the rights of migrants and the duties of states under international law. States do have a prerogative and a sovereign duty and right to manage migration and their borders, but they must do so in line with international standards. In the context, whilst IOM does not have a specific mandate to monitor and investigate enforced disappearances, IOM's policies and programming strive to follow a rights-based approach and to address human rights violations, which include enforced disappearances. Allow me to share some of the avenues in which IOM tries to tackle directly or indirectly this issue. First, supporting states and key actors in search and rescue operations that are at sea, land, and desert, and enhancing humanitarian border management, aiming to guide stakeholders and prevent practices that contravene international law, such as refoulement and pushbacks, and collective expulsions as well. Providing assistance, screening, and referral to migrants that are in vulnerable situations throughout their journeys. That can go from protection services, urgent shelter, legal assistance and aid, family reunification, psychological support, etc. Organizing capacity building activities on issues that are linked to enforced disappearances, training border and law enforcement officials on the rights of migrants at borders, alternatives to detention, training forensic and medical personnel as well on data management, and training judicial actors on counter-trafficking, just to name a few. But also expanding and fostering regular pathways to support migrants moving safely and regularly, thereby reducing the risks of disappearances, including enforced disappearances, along routes that are irregular and that are highly dangerous, while working to address discrimination and human rights violations in countries of origin, transit, and destination. Data remains a challenging but a central issue for IOM, and it is a crucial issue as well for the enforced disappearance discussion. Considering the differences, as has been shared by my colleague from the committee, Barbara, the differences between migrants who are victims of a disappearance and those that are missing, let me mention one of IOM's flagship initiatives, the Missing Migrants Project, which records people who have lost their lives in the process of migrating towards an international border, an international destination, regardless of their migratory status. Since 2014, the project has recorded 70,725 missing migrants, 70,725 victims, persons who have lost their lives, as well as the families and communities that they have left behind. This project aims to improve data and documentation of migrant deaths, also in the context of enforced disappearances, helps identify patterns for these disappearances, and hopes to inform prevention and response strategies. For IOM, we encourage the use of this data, which is public, and hope to continue supporting the committee and all stakeholders in their tremendous and long-standing efforts. In short, IOM's approach to addressing enforced disappearances stems from the organization's commitment to upholding human rights, and focuses on prevention, advocacy, and supporting the main actors, with the objective to increase enforced disappearances prevention and hopefully strengthen accountability for those who are affected. Thank you.
Thank you. So it seems that in some contexts, like the context of Serbia, many times families of migrants are left alone. And that's why Click Active took on the topic. How did you develop your work related to enforced disappearances in the context of migration?
Hello. First of all, hello to everyone, and thank you for the invitation to participate here today. So yeah, that is the question that raised, especially during the last year, and we are strongly through our work trying to address this question of enforced disappearances, especially when it comes to the people who are outside of the formal system and who do not have legal residence status in Serbia. In our work, we have developed our internal procedures that facilitate and help us with reporting these cases to relevant institutions or the organizations that are specialized for this issue, such as Red Cross of Republic of Serbia. And beside that, we also developed some of our internal guidelines that help us to have more effective communication with the families of the people who went missing, but also if there is a positive outcome of the search with people who are found, perhaps on the Serbian ground. The other thing that we are trying to emphasize, and which is especially important to us, is identification of the people who are found on our territory, but when the outcome wasn't that positive, because it often happens, especially in the border areas, that people lose their lives, and they are often buried in these places as unidentified persons. We also try to some of the goals of our work are to identify these key points of crossings and these risky places, and also to speak more about the risks that people encounter on their journeys, whether these are pushbacks or the risky routes or all the different things that they encounter, and to try to do something more with connecting the state institutions with the civil society organizations, because we think that the capacities of the civil society organizations are not used in a properly manner within this cooperation. We also do our advocacy in establishing more clear and more standardized procedures within the search and identification, since we value every life, no matter of the nationality of the person.
Yeah, you touched upon the challenges that you are facing as a CSO in Serbia. Can you develop on that? What are the issues you are facing as a CSO, and what are the issues and challenges that are facing your beneficiaries?
Well, the thing is that the Serbia, for most of the people, is just a transit country, which complicates our work, but also affects on the motivation of the institutions to deal with this really specific issue. And families are those who are reporting the case of the missing ones. And it usually happens that families who are reporting the cases are in some other countries. They are not in Serbia, and they really have a lack of information related to the circumstances of the disappearance of their beloved ones. So then there are possible witnesses of these disappearances, but the witnesses also leave the country. It's quite difficult to reach them. The other thing that happens in the practice is that those people who went missing, if they are registered in Serbia, it happens that they give false information about themselves. They give a false name or age or country of origin, which makes it more difficult to trace them if we are looking for them in some institutions such as hospital, detention centers, or something like that. So the only relevant thing that we have is as information, it's photography of them that family sends us. So these are main like obstacles. But again, when it comes to institutions, then the institutions don't see, as I already mentioned, civil society organizations as partners within this. They see us more as intruders or someone who will criticize them or something like that. So that is the other problem that we are facing in this type of work. And if you are looking at the wider picture, there is no political will for dealing with this issue, which again is pushing people who are in this migratory process towards the smugglers and the smuggling networks, and exposing them to greater risks, such as being kidnapped by smugglers or to go through some risky routes where they are losing their lives. And what we are again hearing from the field, for example, is that smugglers are now offering some premium packages where people need to pay more if they want want their body to be identified if they're drowned or something like that, in that case, a person who is sent by the smugglers will come and identify the body, so they will be buried with the name, and video materials will be sent to the families as a confirmation. So that is really a bad practice and doesn't guarantee anything. And additionally, there is no unified database of the missing persons. So people often lose their traces when they disappear in this context of migration. And if the outcome is negative and if a body is found, it often happens that these people weren't even reported that they were missing. And since there is no mandatory autopsy and the samples of the tissue are not being taken, in these cases, these people are just buried without any trace, without name, without anything. So families who are looking for them cannot find them. It's quite difficult. And just to add one more good example of that practice is in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where there is one of the pathologists who is voluntarily keeping the tissue samples of the refugees who unfortunately drowned in Drina River, most of them, and keeping them for more than 6 months in order that if a family is looking for some relative family member can identify them. So that's it.
Thank you. This premium package from the smugglers that you mentioned gives me chills. It seems that smugglers are going straight into the breach that is left by institutions. And this echoed what I experienced when visiting Serbia, Bosnia and Greece last summer. It seems that CSOs are quite isolated in their struggle and facing their state institutions in Europe, and could maybe get more support from the international organizations. Mrs. CIVIT, from the IOM perspective, is there a need to better articulate the activities of the IOM and the institutions and CSOs?
IOM definitely continues to work with the support of member states, donors, civil society actors, and the rest of the UN system to strengthen our efforts in the area of human rights. And because the issue of enforced disappearances within the context of migration is so politically sensitive, so complex, and still so marginalized, definitely it is extremely relevant to continue articulating IOM's work with other stakeholders, and not only with traditional partners. Building more equitable partnerships with national and local actors, and especially advocating that they play a more central role in developing migration-related policies and programming is one of IOM's top priorities, and I think is very much in line with what the colleague was sharing and what also our previous panelists were let's say, complaining about. These collaboration efforts should consider the cross-thematic nature of enforced disappearances in the framework of migration. That means that enforced disappearances often intersect with irregular migration phenomena. We've mentioned it, human trafficking, smuggling, as well as other human rights violations, which often bring with them abuses, discrimination, and also exploitation, particularly to migrants who are in an irregular administrative situation and those who are in a particularly vulnerable situation. In this sense, it is essential to jointly address gaps, to continue the coordination efforts amongst all actors. This platform, I think, is an excellent example of doing so, in order to avoid duplication and fragmentation of initiatives. Also, to promote information sharing on best practices, it was mentioned between countries of origin, transit, destination, and return, some of those who still face challenges, like Colombia, Morocco, and Mexico, but who have also advanced quite a lot in this area. We believe it is also essential to continue strengthening and innovating in fundraising efforts and in joint advocacy efforts, which should not only include awareness raising and capacity building actions, but also focus on enhancing national frameworks, national and policy legislative frameworks in line with the General Commons recommendations. And to be able to continue strengthening this organizational priority in human rights, IOM aims to continue investing in inclusive, sustainable, and solid partnerships with key stakeholders, including national and local authorities, the UN system, of course, the committee, national human rights institutions, civil society actors, but also the media, the academia, and the private sector, with the objective of capitalizing on each other's expertise and strengths, and improving IOM's own internal mechanisms as well. We also hope to continue leveraging IOM's convening role on migration through the UN Network on Migration as the network's coordinator and secretariat, and in the framework of other international and regional forums beyond the Global Compact, to continue amplifying migrants' voices, those of their families and communities too, and advocating for their rights.
Thank you. So from staying on the institutional point of view, Colombia will be for the very first time member of the Human Rights Council. How are you expecting to articulate your experience as a main destination countries and the challenges that the world is facing with enforced disappearance in this context?
Thank you, Charlotte. Bueno, yo creo que nuestra membresía en el Consejo de Derechos Humanos, que empieza este año por 3 años, sumada a nuestro papel como coauspiciador del Segundo Foro Mundial sobre Refugiados y como país campeón del Pacto Mundial sobre Migraciones, y actualmente también como presidente del Foro Mundial sobre Migración y Desarrollo, que recibimos de Francia el año pasado, con el propósito de llevar a cabo este foro y sus actividades preparatorias en Ginebra y este foro en Colombia este año. Todos estos roles nos den una experiencia significativa, una capacidad significativa para poner el tema de la desaparición forzada de migrantes sobre la mesa. Porque, como lo mencioné en mi anterior intervención, el tema de la desaparición forzada nos ha afectado profundamente y al mismo tiempo nos ha dado esa experiencia, dolorosa pero valiosa. Así que Colombia, dotada de esas herramientas y como país de tránsito, origen y destino, sin duda está en una posición estratégica para articular esfuerzos y propuestas efectivas, y haremos todo lo que esté a nuestro alcance en esa dirección. Ahora debemos empezar por reconocer que la desaparición forzada de migrantes afecta a miles de individuos a nivel global, especialmente aquellos que se ven obligados a tomar rutas irregulares. Muchas de las desapariciones ocurren cuando hay falta de garantías sociales y legales, falta de acceso a servicios básicos y una secuencia de vulneración de derechos que hace que las personas se expongan a más riesgos, entre ellos las redes de tráfico y crimen organizado, abusos por parte de las autoridades, abusos físicos y psicológicos. Esta es una situación que ha llevado a que la migración para muchos hoy sea una odisea marcada por la violencia y el sufrimiento. En el Consejo de Derechos Humanos no podremos desconocer todas estas vulneraciones y Colombia está lista para aunar esfuerzos a fin de que se discuta la desaparición forzada de migrantes, así como otras violaciones a los derechos humanos de los migrantes. Como comunidad internacional, tenemos la responsabilidad de exigir que los derechos de las personas migrantes sean respetados y que los estados actúen de manera coordinada, eficiente y respetuosa de la dignidad humana. Tenemos las puertas abiertas como país al escrutinio internacional y en unas semanas atenderemos la visita del relator especial de los derechos humanos de los migrantes en Colombia, el señor Jehad Mahdi, quien además visitará nuestra frontera con Panamá. Sé que a partir de su informe final y los de otros relatores que visitarán nuestro país este año, tendremos buenas herramientas para proponérselas a los miembros del Consejo.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so I will suggest that we already take some takeaways from this session to welcome some questions from the audience.
Good morning from my side. Thank you for inviting me and thank you all for joining this important panel to discuss this very complex topic. From the panelists in the first panel today, we can hear about pluralism of topics on this issue, namely protection of migrants from enforced disappearances is the meeting point of human rights law, criminal law, social protection, social inclusion, border security, visa policies, etc. So this pluralism of topics necessarily resulting in pluralism of actors and mechanisms involved. And when you have pluralism of actors and mechanisms, necessarily there is also a huge discrepancy between practices applied across the world. But also we need to be honest and to say that this pluralism of actors and mechanisms sometimes confusing migrants and their families, confusing victims, what they should do, who is doing what, who is the right address to apply for answers and to apply for support. So how to resolve this situation, these discrepancies in practices and this pluralism of actors? I believe that the key is to recognize three words: policies, practices, and victims. And I'm also aware that you will say that I should invert the order of these words and to put victims as on the first place. But truth to be told, everything starts and everything finishes with victims. When you decide to develop policies, you need to have victim-oriented policies. And we heard yesterday and we heard today about importance of political will. But political will is not always enough. Sometimes you need to change the perception of migrants and to change some very old patterns and to change fiber of the society. In those cases, political will is not enough. You need comprehensive policies. And I believe that development and adoption of the first general comment is actually the first milestone in this process. Through the general comment, the committee provided the general framework for those policies. And if we need to define targets, goals in a short-term, mid-term, and a long-term period, I believe that the most important goal in this short-term period will be to disseminate content of the general comment and to try to identify specificities of various regions in terms of the policies. As a midterm goal, we need to work all together on aligning regional and national policies with this general framework. And as a long-term goal, we need to work on the alignment and improvement of the practices based on those previously aligned policies. You said 3 minutes, I believe it was 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if I may add to that, I take away also safe routes and policies, migration policy that respects human rights everywhere, as well as concrete tools for families and CSOs to search for the disappeared, and transnational cooperation. Like, there is a real work to be done that is not being done right now for cooperation between governments. Thank you. We would like to welcome some questions, and if we could like eat a little bit on the coffee break, that would be great. So we have maybe 20 minutes. And yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. I'm from Balochistan. Unfortunately, the tragic number of enforced disappearances in Balochistan exceeds 40,000. And to escape from this practice, many people from my land flee, just like me. But there is another issue. Most of our people flee to Middle East, which is closer to our region. Recently, there were multiple cases where the countries that in Middle East are involved in forcibly disappearing our people and handing them over to Pakistan. 2 cases were recorded in UAE, United Arab Emirates, where 2 of Baloch activists were forcibly disappeared by the authorities of UAE and then handed over illegally to Pakistan. And since then, one of them is Rashid Hussain, who is till date forcibly disappeared, even though Pakistani media announced that he is in their captivity, but till date his family has no information about him. So my question is, how can we stop other states involving enforced disappearances and handing over our people to our oppressors? Thank you.
On prend plusieurs questions? Ou
No.
une par une?
Okay, one more.
Gracias. Quisiera preguntarle a los panelistas qué posibilidades existen de elevar la categoría de la desaparición como caso de crimen de lesa humanidad, puesto que los crímenes de lesa humanidad se caracterizan por ser sistemáticos y generalizados y digamos que tienen una relación con la responsabilidad de los estados. En el caso de la migración, ¿qué posibilidades existen de dilucidar esta categoría y hacer que la responsabilidad de los estados pueda hacerse expresa y de esta manera incluirlo como un crimen de lesa humanidad? Gracias.
Pour l'instant, on répond. Et encore une?
Une là, ouais.
Qui?
Nijara, ouais.
Thank you very much. My name is Nijara Ahmetašević. I'm a researcher, human rights defender and journalist from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia is one of the main routes, migration routes in between European Union countries. Since 2018, at least, more than 300 people died on the route through the Balkans. So it's a Balkan route, many of them in Bosnia and many of them in rivers, which are in between countries, in between Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. Bodies of these people are left without care. Nobody is doing anything but local people, and Goran mentioned one of them. And most of us, what we are doing that as a volunteers. One of the main obstacles for everything that we do together with families and migrants is the state, and second one is the IOM. IOM in Bosnia and Herzegovina has a very specific role, and in some way, which is difficult to explain here, they took under protectorate. Bosnia and Herzegovina is protectorate, the only one in Europe. So IOM took under protectorate everything that has anything to do with migration management in Bosnia and Herzegovina. My question is in relation to recommendation, one of the recommendations that you just mentioned, which is to have migration process that respects human rights, to develop migration process, but also something close to what you said. Like one day as a researcher, when I research on the role of perpetrators of potential crimes against humanity when it comes to migration, I will definitely look at the role of the IOM and what IOM have done. My question is, how do you reconcile the role of the organization that takes place in building a fortress, Europe or other countries, and having a role in migration management and militarization of borders, and your role as one of the UN organizations which are obliged to follow basic human rights rules and basic human rights of people. So at the same time, to put it in very simple, IOM is participating in murder of migrants who are trying to find a safe routes, while helping the states and their donors, because you are led by the donors, to militarize the world, to make it unsafe place for all of us. And at the same time, you are talking about human rights. What are the human rights for IOM?
I will let IOM reply, and we'll take a couple of other questions afterwards, please, and then maybe click active.
All the questions, or only the one that is directly? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions and the comments and the criticism. Honestly, that's why we're here, to further discuss, to strengthen our work, and to talk how to do things better. So I obviously, although I have been I was in Sarajevo last September, and I was lucky to see the role and the job that our office is doing in the country. I was there for working on safe and regular pathways with governmental entities and the national human rights institutions. It is, of course, not my expertise, the work and the legislative and policy framework that we have in the country. So thank you for all the background information. And I am sure that my colleagues and our chief of mission and my colleagues in the region will be more than happy to be in touch with you and the research that you're doing. That will be definitely very informative and important for their job. So I'm happy to do the liaison as soon as we get the coffee break. Now, obviously, we all have each own views and understandings of what IOM is, what IOM does. I have myself, I'm a human rights lawyer. I've been working in other contexts, not with IOM, but with ICTJ, with the ICJ, in Colombia and in Latin America, including Mexico as well. And I've been working with IOM for the past 10 years. Now, this is, of course, not about me, but this is to say that from an HQ perspective and from a new strategic plan and a UN agreement perspective, IOM, it is not only morally, but in line with our constitution and mandates. If you read about and encouraged to read these new documents also online in our new institutional approach to protection, we are, of course, forced to respect, to protect, not fulfill only, because fulfillment would be a complementary obligation as an international organization, as UNHCR, OHCHR, as any other international organization. We are complementary to member states, and of course we are an international governmental institution. But we do have not only now the mandate, but the obligation to respond to human rights violations. One example, and of course nothing is perfect and nothing will be able to respond to the gravity and the complexity of all migration matters and human rights violations around the globe targeting migrants and migrant communities. We see them every day. We work with them every day in the field. I was in Morocco before, and I was a protection officer there, working hand in hand with with civil society and social actors and communities, offering shelter to VOTs, unaccompanied and separated children, etc. But beyond that, I think that it's very important that from our side, we continue strengthening our internal human rights mechanisms. One example that I can share with you is that IOM has just launched an internal wide, if I may, an internal but also wide and global process of determining, identifying, and further working on serious, on grave human rights violations committed against migrants. Now, this is a new institutional approach, and we hope that it will help not only showcase the work that we do, because we don't do the work alone. We wouldn't be doing this work without civil society actors, without you all who are around this room, also national stakeholders, of course, and our donors and partners. But this is an example of one of the things that we do to hopefully also improve and enhance and strengthen our own human rights accountability.
Thank you.
Now, if I may just respond to the other two questions. Thank you. Just
sorry, I will just give the floor for someone else, but we can continue discuss at the break. On the question of how to work with states who are responsible for enforced disappearance and also responsibility and fight against impunity, maybe Mrs. LOCHBIHLER could give us some insight.
Well, I was thinking answering the question from Baluchistan. So I assume Baluchistan part of Pakistan. Okay, I just want to, on what country we're speaking. So you see, in our committee, we can only deal with countries who ratified the convention. Now, the example you gave is that people from your community are in the Middle East. So we have very few ratifications, but there are Oman ratified, Iraq ratified, and in such cases, of course, if you have, if you report these cases, let's say through the Foreign Ministry of Pakistan has to address the Foreign Ministry of Oman and search for migrants who have a contract, let's say on the construction site. And when we in the committee have a dialogue with Oman, we can ask for this. If you have very specific information that a person disappeared and you draw to our committee, we have the urgent action mechanism, and we can then check your information and write a letter to, let's say, Oman and say, please see where this person is. In a broader concept, I have to say, not relating to the Middle East, of course, there is also what we raised earlier, a lot of racism, stigmatization, and hatred against migrants from different communities. And so I was surprised to hear that, for example, now in Portugal, the extreme right party makes a campaign specifically on migrants from the Indian subcontinent, like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. So in this context, we can also address this. But a key for us is that the country has ratified. So for your case, I think also lining up with the working group on enforced disappearance, then can work with all, is also an advice I can give.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can take a couple of other questions. I don't know where the mic is gone, but you can use.
شكرا. سأقدم مداخلتي باللغة العربية. أنا اسمي ياسين، أشتغل على موضوع الهجرة كمدافع على حقوق الإنسان في المغرب. والمغرب كما تعلمون هو بلد عبور.
And there is no translator in Arabic. Okay.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Okay. نشتغل على موضوع الهجرة يعني في دول جنوب المتوسط. أعتقد أنه أصل المشكل مشكل الاختفاء أو الموت يعود أساساً لسنة 1995 والمتعلق بدخول اتفاقية حيز شنغن، حيز التنفيذ. قبل سنة 1995 لم تكن حالات الاختفاء أو الموت في البحر الأبيض المتوسط قبل هذه السنة. الاتحاد الأوروبي اشتغل على غلق الحدود مع المستعمرات السابقة وفتح الحدود بين دوله. وبالتالي أعتقد أنه تشديد القيود على الفيزا هو أهم سبب للموت والاختفاء، ودول الجنوب تتحمل المسؤولية كذلك، لأنه ليس هناك نقاش جدي حول موضوع الاختفاء، لأنه أساساً مرتبط بالاختفاء مرتبط بقانون واتفاقيات غلق الحدود. من أهم الملاحظات التي دونتها كذلك في المحور الأول هو غياب الأبحاث حول موضوع رفض الدول القيام بمسح كامل لكل الاختفاءات المتعلقة بالهجرة، عدم التنسيق في تحليل الحمض النووي من أجل الدفن. عندنا حالات كثيرة ديال دول من إفريقيا مهاجرين سواء من دول جنوب الصحراء أو شمال إفريقيا. لدينا مشكل كبير في تحديد هويات الناس. عدم الترخيص للجمعيات الخاصة خصوصا في الجنوب بالعمل في البحر. دونك عندنا حالات اختفاء كثيرة في البحر وليس هناك ترخيص للموضوع، مع تجريم بعد تجريم ولا غلق معابر حدود يجعل المهاجر ياخذ طرق اخطر. والان ولا الطريق مش شمال افريقيا، اصبح الطريق تركيا صربيا وطريق البلقان يذهب الى الكثير من الشباب. شكرا.
شكرا جزيلا. Gordana, does it echo to you and your work on another side of the European Union? Do you want to react on that?
On this issue, you want to respond, or I can say something?
Yeah, please go ahead. And we.
Regarding this question that you mentioned, although as Charlotte says, we are working on the opposite side of Europe, the issue is the same, and collecting of these body samples and keeping them and something like that, that is something that I believe needs to be regulated by the law, although it isn't. And although we as the organization, we are trying to do something more about it, what I already mentioned, until there is no political will for the institutions to decide to change something, I believe it will be still difficult to do something within that question. So up to us that we do what is from our field of work, but we are not the only one within all of this process.
Thank you very much. I think we have to close up. I'm sorry.